I, 35F, have been grappling with family drama for as long as I can remember, but recent events have pushed me to my absolute breaking point. I'm hoping for some advice or perspective from anyone who's been in a similar situation because right now, I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of hurt, confusion, and resentment. For context, I have an adopted sister, 34F, who's only a year younger than me. Our parents adopted her when she was just a baby, and I've grown up alongside her my entire life. You'd think that would make us close, like two peas in a pod, but the reality couldn't be further from that idyllic image. From my earliest memories, it was clear that our parents favored my sister. They doted on her, gave her everything she wanted, and seemed to hang on her every word. I remember being 5 years old and proudly showing my mom a drawing I'd made, only to have her brush me off because my sister was reciting the alphabet for the 100th time. It might seem like a small thing, but it was indicative of a pattern that would define our family dynamic for decades to come. As we grew older, the gap between us only widened. In elementary school, my sister struggled with reading, and our parents spent hours every night working with her. Meanwhile, I excelled in my studies but rarely received more than a cursory "good job" for my report cards. In middle school, when I won the science fair, my parents skipped the awards ceremony because my sister had a dance recital. It was always like that, her needs, her achievements, her struggles always took precedence over mine. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't neglected or abused in the traditional sense. We always had food on the table, a roof over our heads, and our basic needs met. But the emotional neglect was real and deeply painful. I learned early on that the only way to get any attention in our household was to be perfect, to achieve, to excel. So that's what I did. I threw myself into my studies with a fervor that bordered on obsession. While my sister was out at parties and hanging out with friends in high school, I was holed up in my room, studying for AP exams and padding my college applications. It paid off. I got into a top-tier university on a partial scholarship. I thought, finally, this would make my parents proud. But on the day I left for college, they spent more time fussing over how my sister would cope without me than celebrating my achievement. College was a revelation. For the first time in my life, I was judged solely on my own merits, not in comparison to my sister. I thrived academically and socially, making real friends who valued me for who I was. I graduated summa cum laude and landed a job at a prestigious firm right out of college. Over the next decade, I climbed the corporate ladder with single-minded determination. Every promotion, every achievement was driven by that little voice inside me that still craved my parents' approval. I now hold a senior management position at a Fortune 500 company, and I'm proud of what I've achieved. But that pride is always tinged with a bitterness because no matter what I accomplish, it never seems to be enough for my family. My sister, on the other hand, has bounced from job to job, never really settling into a career. She still lives at home with our parents, who continue to support her financially and emotionally. You might think my success would make my parents proud, but it seems to have only fueled their favoritism towards my sister. They're always making excuses for her lack of direction, saying things like, she's just trying to find her passion, or, not everyone needs to climb the corporate ladder to be happy. Meanwhile, my accomplishments are often met with lukewarm congratulations, if they're acknowledged at all. This dynamic has strained every aspect of our family relationships. Family gatherings are a minefield of passive-aggressive comments and thinly veiled resentment. I've tried talking to my parents about how I feel, but they always dismiss my concerns, accusing me of being jealous or overly sensitive. My sister, for her part, seems to revel in her favored status, often making snide remarks about how I'm married to my job, or too busy for family. I've spent years in therapy trying to work through these issues, to build my self-esteem and set healthy boundaries. But no matter how much progress I make, every interaction with my family seems to set me back. I've considered cutting ties completely, but the thought of losing my family, dysfunctional as they are, is heartbreaking. This brings me to the events of last week, which have left me questioning everything about my family relationships. It was my sister's birthday, and as usual, our parents threw her an extravagant party. They invited extended family, friends, and even some of her old classmates. The house was decked out like it was a wedding reception, with catered food, an open bar, and even a live band. For comparison, my birthday last month was marked by a quiet dinner with just the four of us, where the conversation mostly revolved around my sister's latest business idea, a social media app for pet owners that she's convinced will be the next big thing. I tried to talk about a major project I'm leading at work, but my parents' eyes glazed over after about 2 minutes. During the party, I tried to keep a low profile. I mingled politely, made small talk with relatives, and did my best to be supportive of my sister on her big day. But as the night wore on, I could feel the familiar resentment bubbling up inside me. It wasn't just the lavish party, it was the way our parents fawned over her, the way relatives asked about her life while barely acknowledging mine, the way she soaked up all the attention like it was her birthright. I found myself retreating to a corner, nursing a glass of wine and trying to quell the anxiety attack I could feel building. A cousin noticed my distress and came over to check on me. "Are you okay?" she asked, genuine concern in her voice. It was the first time all night someone had bothered to ask how I was doing. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, my sister's voice cut through the crowd. "Attention everyone," she called out, tapping her glass with a spoon. "I'd like to make a toast." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to my sister. She was slightly unsteady on her feet, and I could tell from the flush in her cheeks that she'd had quite a bit to drink. Still, she managed to paste on a winning smile as she launched into her speech. At first, it seemed like a typical birthday thank you. She expressed gratitude for the party, thanked everyone for coming, and raised a toast to our parents for their love and support. But then, her tone changed, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "I'm especially grateful to Mom and Dad," she said, her voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. "They've always treated me better than their own daughter. I mean, just look at this party. When was the last time they threw something like this for my sister?" I felt my face grow hot as all eyes in the room turned to me. My sister wasn't done though. "But I guess that's because I've always been the better daughter," she continued, her words slurring slightly from the champagne. "I mean, sure, my sister has her fancy job and her big salary, but at the end of the day, who do Mom and Dad really love? Who brings joy into their lives? It's not the cold, career-obsessed robot who barely makes time for family." I was frozen in place, unable to believe what I was hearing. The room had gone deathly quiet, save for a few uncomfortable coughs and the sound of my sister's voice, which seemed to grow louder with each passing second. "You know, it's funny," she went on, swaying slightly. "Everyone always talked about how smart my sister was, how successful she'd be. But look at us now. She's alone, married to her job, while I'm here, surrounded by family and friends who actually love me." I looked to our parents, expecting, hoping, they would step in and stop this cruel charade. But they just sat there, looking uncomfortable but making no move to intervene. In that moment, I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. My sister rambled on, tearing into every aspect of my life, my appearance, my lack of a love life, even implying that my career success was due to sleeping my way to the top. With each word, I felt myself shrinking, years of pent-up hurt and anger threatening to explode. Just when I thought I couldn't take anymore, just as I was about to run from the room in tears, my aunt, our mother's sister, stood up. The look on her face was one of fury and determination. She walked over to where I was standing and handed me an envelope. "Don't open this until I'm done talking," she said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. Then she turned to face the crowd, her eyes blazing. What happened next was like a scene from a soap opera. My aunt revealed that my sister wasn't adopted from an agency, she was my aunt's biological daughter. Apparently, when my aunt got pregnant unexpectedly in her early 20s, she wasn't ready to be a mother. Rather than terminate the pregnancy, she asked my parents to adopt the baby. "I thought I was doing the right thing," my aunt said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I thought my baby would have a better life with my sister and her husband. I thought she'd grow up to be kind, compassionate, grateful for the life she'd been given. But instead..." She turned to my sister, who had gone pale as a sheet. "Instead, you've grown into a selfish, entitled brat who thinks it's okay to publicly humiliate her sister. I've stood by for years, watching how this family dynamic has played out, and I can't stay silent anymore." The room erupted into chaos. My sister was screaming, demanding to know if it was true. Our parents were trying to calm her down while shooting daggers at my aunt. Relatives were whispering and pointing. And me? I just stood there, clutching the envelope, feeling like the ground had disappeared from under my feet. My aunt's voice cut through the noise again. I had always believed that if my daughter was being raised by my sister, she would grow up to be a wonderful person, she said, her disappointment evident. But clearly, I was wrong. No decent person would ever try to humiliate their sibling the way you just did. She then turned to me and told me to open the envelope. Inside was a blank check. Fill in whatever amount you want, my aunt said. I had planned to give this to her as a birthday gift, but after seeing how she's turned out, I have no interest in rewarding that behavior. With that, my aunt walked out, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. It didn't last long. My sister lunged at me, trying to grab the check from my hands. Our parents had to physically restrain her as she screamed and cried, completely hysterical. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran to my room, locked the door, and broke down. Years of feeling second best, of swallowing my hurt and resentment, came pouring out. I cried for hours, ignoring the knocks on my door and the muffled arguments I could hear from downstairs. It's been a week since then, and I still don't know what to do. I haven't left my room except for necessities. Our parents have tried to talk to me, but I can't bring myself to face them. My sister has been alternating between sending me hateful messages and pleading for forgiveness, and the check, of course. Part of me wants to cash that check, pack my bags, and never look back. I've spent my entire life trying to earn love and approval from people who seem incapable of giving it to me. Maybe it's time I stop trying. Maybe it's time I put myself first for once. But another part of me is terrified of losing my family, dysfunctional as they are. They're the only family I've ever known. The thought of navigating the world without them, of spending holidays alone, of not having anyone to call in an emergency, it's overwhelming. I'm also grappling with a lot of conflicting emotions about my sister. On one hand, I'm furious with her for her behavior at the party and for years of subtle, and not so subtle, put-downs. On the other hand, I can't help but feel a twinge of sympathy. Finding out you're adopted, and in such a public and humiliating way, must be incredibly traumatic. Does that excuse her behavior? Absolutely not. But it does complicate things. As for my parents, I'm struggling to understand how they could have sat there and let my sister tear into me like that. Were they just shocked? Or does their silence speak volumes about how they really feel about me? And how do I even begin to address years of favoritism and emotional neglect? I feel like I'm at a crossroads, and I don't know which path to take. Do I try to mend these broken relationships? Is it even possible to build something healthy from such a toxic foundation? Or do I walk away and try to build a new life for myself, one where I'm not constantly seeking approval that never comes? I'm lost, Reddit. I've spent my whole life trying to earn my family's love and approval, only to be humiliated and cast aside. How do I move forward from here? Is there any hope for reconciliation, or should I accept that some families are beyond repair? Any advice or perspective would be appreciated. I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of hurt and confusion, and I don't know which way is up anymore. Update 1: It's been 2 days since the disastrous birthday party, and I'm still processing everything. This morning, my aunt visited me. She looked exhausted as she explained more about the adoption. She was young and scared when she got pregnant. My parents had been trying for another child, so it seemed like the perfect solution. They agreed to keep it a secret to protect everyone. She'd been saving money for years, planning to give it to my sister when she was ready to be independent. But after the party, she realized I deserved it more. She handed me a blank check. I felt conflicted, vindicated that someone acknowledged the unfair treatment, but guilty about taking something meant for my sister. I tried to refuse, but my aunt insisted, calling it back pay for emotional labor. That night, I made a decision. I packed a bag, left a note for my parents, and checked into a hotel across town. I needed space to think. Over the next few days, I ignored my family's calls and messages. I spoke with my therapist, consulted a financial advisor about the check, and did some soul searching. 5 days later, I emailed my parents. I told them I was safe but needed time. I said I'd consider rebuilding our relationship under certain conditions. They must acknowledge the years of favoritism, we all attend family therapy, my sister makes a public apology, and they stop enabling her behavior and treat us equally. They replied quickly, expressing relief and asking me to come home to talk. We agreed to meet at a cafe near my hotel. The meeting was tense. My parents seemed remorseful, agreeing to therapy and promising to work on our relationships. But they hesitated about my sister's public apology, saying her adoption revelation was traumatic. I stood firm, insisting her behavior required a public apology. We left with an uneasy truce. My parents agreed to everything except the public apology, which they discussed with my sister. Negotiations continued over the next few days. My sister initially refused to apologize, sending angry messages. But as I held my ground, her tone changed. She texted an apology, saying she was drunk and upset at the party. I replied that the apology needed to be public and address years of hurtful behavior, not just the party incident. This led to more angry messages, then silence. My parents tried mediating, suggesting compromises like a family-only apology or a written statement. As this dragged on, I felt torn. Part of me wanted to stand firm, demanding long overdue respect. Another part was tired of fighting, questioning if it was worth it. My therapist reminded me it's okay to prioritize my well-being. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, she said. It's necessary for healthy relationships. I've decided to give my family one last chance to meet my conditions. If they can't, I'll use my aunt's check to start a new life elsewhere, free from family drama and old hurts. As I prepare to deliver this ultimatum, I feel anxious but hopeful. Whatever happens will shape my future relationships and life. I hope I'm making the right choice. I'll keep you updated. Thank you all for your support. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in this struggle. Update 2. It's been a week since my last update, and things have taken a drastic turn. I've decided to withdraw the conditions I set for reconciliation, but not for the reasons you might think. After days of back and forth with my family, I realized that their attempts at negotiation were more about damage control than genuine remorse. My sister's apology texts became increasingly manipulative, alternating between guilt-tripping and gaslighting. "You're tearing this family apart," she'd write, followed by, "I don't even remember what I said at the party. Are you sure you're not exaggerating?" My parents, meanwhile, continued to push for a compromise that felt more like sweeping things under the rug than addressing the real issues. They suggested a private family meeting where my sister would apologize, but balked at the idea of acknowledging their role in fostering this dysfunctional dynamic. As the pressure mounted, I found myself losing sleep, constantly checking my phone, and feeling anxious every time it buzzed. It was clear that this negotiation was taking a toll on my mental health. That's when I made the decision to withdraw my conditions. Not because I think they're unreasonable, but because I realize now that true change can't be forced or negotiated. It has to come from within, and my family simply isn't there yet. I sent a brief email to my parents, "I'm rescinding my previous conditions. I need space and time to heal. Please respect my wishes and don't contact me for a while." Their response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone exploded with calls, texts, and voicemails. They showed up at my workplace, forcing me to ask security to escort them out. They even contacted some of my friends, trying to get them to convince me to come home. Their messages ranged from pleading, "We love you, please come home," to angry, "How can you do this to us?" to manipulative, "Your sister is devastated, she's not eating." It's been a constant barrage of emotional warfare. The guilt is crushing at times. There are moments when I wonder if I'm overreacting, if I should just go home and try to forget everything. But then I remember the years of feeling invisible, of having my achievements dismissed, of watching my sister be favored time and time again. I've started seeing my therapist twice a week to help cope with the stress. She's been helping me set boundaries, like blocking my family's numbers and setting up email filters. It feels extreme, but it's necessary for my peace of mind right now. Work has become my sanctuary. I've thrown myself into projects, staying late at the office to avoid going back to my empty apartment. My colleagues have noticed the change in me, and a few have reached out with concern. I'm grateful for their support, even if I can't fully explain the situation. As for the check from my aunt, I still haven't cashed it. It sits in my desk drawer, a constant reminder of the choice I have to make. Part of me wants to tear it up, to prove that I don't need their money or approval. Another part sees it as a lifeline, a chance to start fresh somewhere new. I've started researching job opportunities in other cities, even other countries. The idea of a complete change is both terrifying and exhilarating. Could I really leave everything behind and start over? For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm learning to sit with the discomfort of uncertainty, to trust that I'll know what to do when the time comes. Some days are harder than others. There are moments when I miss my family so much it physically hurts. But there are also moments of unexpected peace, where I realize I'm breathing easier than I have in years. I know this journey is far from over. There will be more difficult decisions to make, more emotional hurdles to overcome. But for the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first. It's uncomfortable and often painful, but it also feels right. Thank you all for your continued support and advice. It means more than you know to have this space to share and process. I'll update again when there's more to report. Until then, I'm focusing on healing and discovering who I am outside of my family's shadow. Update 3. It's been 3 weeks since my last update, and the situation has escalated dramatically. Last Saturday, while visiting my aunt, we were stunned by my sister's sudden appearance at the door, clearly intoxicated and enraged. She barged in, screaming, "You've ruined everything. You stole my mother, and now you're trying to steal my life." Her eyes were wild, and the smell of alcohol was overwhelming. She lunged at me, forcing my aunt and me to restrain her. My sister hurled accusations, claiming I had always been jealous and had manipulated everyone against her. The venom in her voice was shocking, even after everything that had happened. My aunt's reaction surprised me. Gone was her usual calm demeanor. Her face hardened as she forcibly removed my sister from the house, saying firmly, "You need to leave now." Outside, my sister continued her tirade, drawing attention from neighbors. "You're not my mother," she yelled at my aunt. "You gave me away. You don't get to pretend you care now." Some neighbors threatened to call the police. Eventually, my sister left, peeling away in her car. Inside, my aunt was visibly shaken. We talked for hours, and she confessed her struggle with guilt over the adoption. She had hoped revealing the truth would make amends, but now realized the damage ran much deeper. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she said quietly. "But maybe I just created a mess for everyone." The incident has had far-reaching consequences. My parents called later, furious and accusing me of turning my aunt against my sister and trying to destroy our family. They wouldn't listen to my explanations. The family is now deeply divided, with extended family members taking sides. What was once a private matter has become a full-blown family feud. I'm overwhelmed by the intensity of it all. Part of me wants to retreat and start fresh somewhere new, but another part feels responsible, even though I know it's not my fault. My aunt has suggested I stay with her for a while, concerned for my safety given my sister's state. I'm considering it, but worry it might escalate the situation further. Through all of this, I'm trying to maintain some normalcy. I go to work, see my therapist, and try to take care of myself. But the weight of this family drama is a constant pressure. I wonder if there's any coming back from this. Can a family recover from such deep-seated resentment and anger? Is it worth trying, or is it better to walk away? For now, I'm taking it one day at a time, focusing on my own healing and trying not to get dragged back into the chaos. It's not easy, but I'm determined to find a way forward, with or without my family's support. Thank you all for your continued support. It means more than you know. I'll update again when I can, hopefully with better news. Update 4. It's been a month since my last update, and I've made some life-altering decisions. After the chaotic encounter with my sister at my aunt's house, I realized I needed to take drastic steps to protect my mental health and build a future for myself. I've thrown myself completely into my work, approaching my boss about taking on additional responsibilities and potentially relocating to our company's branch in another state. To my surprise, she was incredibly supportive. I'm now in line for a senior management position that would require me to move across the country. It's scary, but also exhilarating. The new role comes with a significant pay raise and the chance to lead a major project. I've been working 12-hour days, attending every possible training session, and networking like crazy to prepare for this transition. My colleagues have been curious about my sudden intensity, but I've managed to deflect most questions. A few close work friends know bits and pieces of my situation, and they've been incredibly supportive. As for the financial aspect, I finally made a decision about my aunt's check. After much deliberation and consultation with a financial advisor, I decided to cash it. My therapist helped me reframe it as an investment in my future, a future free from toxic family dynamics. I've used part of the money to secure an apartment in my potential new city. It's a small, modern place with a view of the city skyline. The rest I've invested in a diverse portfolio. For the first time in my life, I feel financially secure and independent. The hardest part has been the definitive break from my family. I've blocked all their numbers and email addresses. I've asked my aunt to not pass on any messages from them. It's been painful, like amputating a part of myself, but I know it's necessary for my healing. There are moments of doubt, of course. Late at night, I sometimes find myself tempted to call and try one last time to make things right. But then I remember the years of gaslighting, the constant feeling of being less than, the explosive confrontation at my aunt's house. It strengthens my resolve to move forward. I've started seeing a new therapist who specializes in family trauma and estrangement. She's been helping me work through my guilt and grief. We're focusing on building a new support system and creating new traditions to replace the family-centered ones I've left behind. I've also joined a support group for people estranged from their families. Hearing others' stories has been both heartbreaking and comforting. It's helped me realize that I'm not alone in this experience, and that it's possible to build a fulfilling life without the family you were born into. As for my aunt, we've maintained our relationship, but with clear boundaries. She respects my decision to cut ties with the rest of the family and doesn't try to play mediator. Her support has been invaluable, but I'm also conscious of not becoming too dependent on her. Looking to the future, I'm filled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The thought of starting over in a new city, with a challenging new job and no family safety net, is daunting. But it's also liberating. For the first time, I feel like I'm living life on my own terms, not constrained by family expectations or old patterns. I've started exploring new hobbies and interests, things I never had time for when I was caught up in family drama. I'm learning to cook, I've joined a local hiking group, and I'm even considering taking up painting. As I pack up my apartment and prepare for this new chapter, I feel a sense of peace I haven't experienced in years. Yes, there's sadness for what I've lost, but there's also hope for what's to come. I'm no longer the family scapegoat or the overlooked child. I'm just me, forging my own path. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your words of encouragement have meant more than you know. This will be my final update. It's time for me to close this chapter and focus on writing the next one. Wish me luck.